It's a rite of passage as old as time, the graduation from elementary school to middle school. At least here in the United States. I know other countries are set up a bit different, so whatever. We go through a lot in those years, gaining new things like insecurity towards our body image and hormones that make us insane. We also lose things, like recess. I know that isn't a new or unique thing to bring up, but losing recess in middle school was a big deal for me. It was the one time of the day where I could forget about schoolwork, forget about grades, and just go outside and play with my friends, get that sunshine, swing on monkey bars, watch some kid break his collarbone while doing something stupid on the slide, which then got all the other slides in the playground removed by the PTA for safety concerns. Yeah, thanks a lot, Cameron. That all got taken away in middle school, where instead you're just going to class all day, the only respite being lunch. Thankfully, there was still room in the virtual world for some freedom. Video games for the most part are banned at school since kids are supposed to be studying and not playing Fortnite. But as with all rules, they get broken. It's only easier nowadays when everyone has a smartphone that almost has all the same functionalities as a DS, at least in the gaming department. Back when I was a kid, we didn't have those. We still found games to play aside from sneaking a Game Boy into class or playing Block Dude on an I-84 calculator. But for the most part, our frontier was the realm of Flash games. Flash games for the uninformed are games made using Adobe Flash. It's a software that's pretty accessible to the masses, and as such, people of all ages and skill sets use it. Flash games are just like any other entertainment medium. There's a lot of them, most of them are crap, few of them are good, and even fewer are great. But today, I'm just going to focus on a few of the ones that stuck out the most to me while growing up. These are 5 Flash games I played as a kid, in no particular ranking or order. Power Fox. No man, no war can stop you. This game is pretty easy to sum up. Here's the difficulty. Pick one. Here are the controls. Read up. And here's the story. You play as Power Fox, a pint-sized canine in a diaper with a boxing glove who flies around the world fighting bad guys in order to rescue the world. That was, certainly a sentence I just said. This axis of villains includes a giant bullfrog in the Amazon that fights you to the theme of Guns N' Roses' Welcome to the Jungle, a monster bonsai tree that's much larger than a normal one in Japan, and of course Adolf Hitler, because why not? It's the internet, baby. That's what sells here apparently. Power Fox is what you would call a one-player fighting game. You fight each opponent in a best 2 out of 3 match when you run around punching and shooting them to death with the various automatic weapons at your disposal. You can also jump into a helicopter to completely annihilate them in 2 seconds if that's what fits your fancy. The matches are quick, chaotic, and most of the time you'll win just by holding down the attack button and running back and forth as your brain screams at you asking, what the hell is going on? After beating all 3 bosses, you get a visit from the President of the United States, who thanks you for your service and says that you'll now be gifted your very own mansion with government-grown weed and hookers. There's really not much else to talk about here. This game can be beaten in about 10 minutes or less, and once you're done, there's really no reason to play it again. It's a framing device that gets used often with varying degrees of success. What if we saw the story from the point of view from the villain instead? What if that random mook that you stumped on in World 2-1 had a family and friends, and what if they decided to take matters into their own hands and get revenge on the hero? That's the basis for a Koopas Revenge. The story is this. A happy Koopa Troopa was celebrating his birthday one year with his friends, and after he left to go visit the bathroom, Mario and his gang show up to crash the party. Mario kidnapped several of Koopa's guests and murdered the rest of them, leading Koopa to go John Wick on the plumber. A Koopa's Revenge is a side-scrolling platformer set in the style of the Mario games, but instead of playing as Mario and his merry band, you're instead playing as a Koopa Troopa. In that regard, the game basically just swaps out the generic enemies you'd normally find in Mario with their good counterparts. Goombas are now Toads, and different colored Yoshis are now the main different types of Koopas. It also does this for power-ups. Instead of getting small when you get hurt like you would in the main series, Koopa loses his shell and gets into his skivvies at his weakest form, whereas when you get the shell back, it's treated like getting a mushroom where you got big in the original game. Fire flowers give you fire power, but it's just a Bowser type of breath weapon, so it's kinda useless. And then the feather gives you wings like a paratroopa instead of the cape. The goal of each stage is to reach the end, platforming and Yoshi stomping your way to victory through each zone, and then eventually fighting one of Mario's friends. Make it all the way to the end of the game, and you take on Mario himself in an epic climactic showdown. Koopas Revenge did kind of fall into that edgelord area that Power Fox did, but it was a little bit more subdued. The most standout example is when you kill an enemy. In regular Mario games, you get a little point score and the enemy flops off the stage, but in Koopas Revenge, the enemy makes a plop sound and erupts in blood. Didn't have to be this way, Toad. You could have just walked away. Instead, you walked back and forth. Of course, there's also the bonus life you can go for in each stage, which you get by stomping the baby versions of Mario, Luigi, Wario, and Oh, Jesus! The actual gameplay is okay. I mean, I know it's a Flash game, so I shouldn't be too harsh on it, but for a platformer, this game has some pretty poor hit detection. The fact that the game has to be played with the keyboard doesn't help much either. It might just be me here, but even if you're only using 2 buttons, keyboards don't seem very intuitive for platformers. I messed up a lot of jumps thanks to the controls and poor response time. But you know what? I give this game points for being playable at least, and as messed up as the game was trying to be, I did like that the boss fights all had unique mechanics that required you to actually learn the boss attack patterns. Except for Luigi, who you could just kill in 2 seconds. A second game was made in the series, and I played it briefly for this video. It looks like they tried to improve over everything in the first game, which was great. They improved the hitboxes, took out the ridiculously over-the-top blood splatters, and even retconned the infanticide by saying that they're just balloons with ketchup. But they also added a wall jump mechanic, which really wasn't needed. Platforming with a keyboard's already hard enough. Throw in wall jumping, where you have to hold against the wall, only makes it worse. Second game still looks like it might be worth playing though. Check it out on Newgrounds. Try to avoid all the porn. This is the only level. This is it. Beat the level. Congratulations! Now do it again, but different. Repeat 30 times. This is the only level is a game that technically has a correct title, but also plays with that in several ways. You play as a blue elephant that has to do one thing. Beat the level. You do this by jumping onto a button, opening a door, and then exiting through a pipe. Each time you complete the stage, you drop back into it, but with a twist. Something has been changed now that requires taking a different approach to completing the level, your only hint being the title of the stage. Maybe your controls were reversed, maybe you have to use the mouse cursor to open the gate, maybe you have to actually refresh the page itself. But regardless, no matter what you do, it's always the same level. I think what I love the most about this Flash game is that it still has me enjoying it years later is its creativity. This is a game that took a very simple concept, that being completing this one stage, and just ran with it in a bunch of different ways. It didn't have to be edgy or random, instead made you just think outside the box, sometimes literally. The game not only made use of basic platform mechanics, but it also relied on testing the player's puzzle-solving skills to think outside the typical game mechanics and limitations to a Flash game, like when you need to go watch the credits to open the door, when you need to do something like refreshing the page or just clicking somewhere completely different. It was a neat idea and I liked it a lot. The game got a couple of sequels that introduced different levels, but with the same concept. Beat the stage despite what odd challenge was thrown at you. It's definitely worth a play. Anytime a new Super Smash Bros. Gets announced, certain parts of the internet erupt into a flurry of fan theories, predictions, speculations, and petty arguing about what characters are going to make it into Nintendo's insanely popular mascot fighter. Not hard to see why. While Smash Bros. Is a fun game in itself, the main appeal of a mascot fighter is who's actually in it. I don't know if you've ever been part of these discussions, but as someone who has dabbled, I can tell you that they can get ugly and outlandish pretty quick. For example, I once had an extended discussion with someone who was absolutely certain that Luffy from One Piece was gonna be in Super Smash Bros. Brawl because he fit the atmosphere. And he also said it wouldn't be weirder than having Solid Snake. Debatable. But hey, I've said it many times, if Cloud can get in, I guess there's just no basis to who's in the game anymore. Bring on the Straw Hats, Nintendo! Anyway, the beauty of the internet is that even if your favorite characters don't make it into Smash Brothers, you can just go make your own video game and put in whoever the hell you want, regardless of whether they're Nintendo characters, video game characters, or even fan characters. Super Smash Flash set out to do just that. The intent was to create a Super Smash Bros. Experience in the form of a Flash game. The game has 28 characters, including classics like Mario, Samus, and Link, but also newcomers like Mega Man X, Zero, Sonic, this was before Brawl, Tails, Knuckles, and Blade the Hedgehog. The game features a ton of the game modes that were featured in Melee, like Classic, Adventure, Stadium modes, and more. Overall, it was a very ambitious fan project, and unfortunately, it's aged less like a fine wine and more like a week-old banana. The game makes use of keyboard controls, so that's already an awkward setup for a fighting game, but also plays like every single character is on ice level of any other video game. Stages are slippery, everybody has very little traction, hit detection with attacks is extremely shoddy, and you rack up stupid amounts of damage in seconds, so you don't really notice until you're flung off the stage. The camera also only follows your character around, opposed to how it works in the actual Smash Bros. Games, so anyone with motion sickness is going to hurl 10 seconds into the match. There's also a severe balance issue since there's a lot of characters that are just flat out better and broken when compared to the others. Characters from one series in particular are noticeably favored. Can you guess which one? I always feel weird critiquing fan games like these because I know there's a lot of fan creators are just making these games for fun or to learn more about Flash and improve their skills, and it seems kind of mean to be harsh on it. But it kind of amazes me that I used to love this Flash game when I was younger and played it with friends in our school's media center, but now seeing how terrible it is when revisiting it. The good news about all of this is that they made/are making a sequel called Super Smash Flash 2, and it addresses pretty much every single complaint of the first game and is a much more competently made game. I played it a little and had a really great time, so there's that. They also had a bunch of characters with series veterans like
Mario, Luigi, Peach, Bowser, Wario, Yoshi,
and of course the fan favorites such as
Ichigo, Naruto, Luffy, Goku.
Well, what do you know? Somewhere, that guy has gotten some vindication. One recurring thing that happened with me in regards to Flash games is how forgettable they are. When I go to the media center and play these games at school, I usually pick up new games all the time. This was partly because the sites we frequented were constantly getting blocked by the school network, but it was also because most of them were extremely shallow and not worth revisiting. Even just making this list took a good bit of digging into my memory bank. The games I chose for this list were ones that were the most vivid or enjoyable to me. It was very rare for me to actually follow a series throughout its entire run with its various sequels and improvements. But I did that with a series called Thing Thing. Thing Thing is a side-scrolling action shooter made by Disease Productions where you play as a customizable character and shoot your way through dozens of other customizable characters using the many different types of guns available to you. Thing Thing was notable in that every single game had a fully customizable protagonist. Sure, this wasn't a unique feature for a game at the time, but something I did like was that every single enemy in the game used the same model as you, but with a randomly generated headpiece and suit, so you'd find yourself fighting against things like a typical John Woo protagonist, all the way up to mummies and guys with dapper top hats. It was kind of like you were fighting your way through a Halloween party, or maybe an anime convention. The other notable thing about Thing Thing was its story, not because it was very well written or unique in any way, but because it was consistent, and it was part of the reason I kept playing through the series from the first one all the way to the final game. There were little bits added in each game that added to the overall narrative in some way until it finally came to its climactic conclusion. It was neat in my opinion, because most other Flash games I played didn't really do that. Either the game never finished its story, which was the most common case because people would just give up, or they just didn't bother picking it up where the previous game ended and just moved right along with something else. Thing Thing was different. The game starts with a very odd, minimalist story and then ties it all together by the fourth game, albeit in a bit of a downer, unfulfilled ending. In the first game, you make a character and then awaken in a cell with some lab coat trying to get you to take your medication. You figure it's probably your anti-schizophrenic medicine to help you cope with your belief that you're actually a hedgehog, but it's unclear. The only way out of this room is to kill the guy, take his gun, and shoot your way out. After that, you go through a series of hallway fights, an elevator sequence, and then fight some sort of robot boss before going outside where a track of Phantasy Star Online plays. At the end of that, you find another robot that gets up and attacks you, at which point the game just sort of kicks you back to the title screen. It was weird and a bit empty, but did make me curious as if there would be more. And there was. Thing Thing 2 is another side-scrolling shooter where you just kill guys who can hardly even fight back. The objective is just to shoot as many fish in a barrel as you can to get the area door to open. When that's done, you move on to the next area to rinse and repeat, all ending with a boss fight with another robot. Again, no story or anything. It was hard to tell if this game was even connected to the first until the third game was confirmed that it was. The third game added the most narrative by quickly giving some exposition on who the protagonist is, that being a lab-created super soldier, and what you had actually been doing so far, that being fighting for your freedom. You fight more bad guys as the game gives the villains guns again and becomes more of a platforming shooter. The game ends on a cliffhanger with your fate uncertain, after which the fourth game picks up and heads towards the character's conclusion, taking the game back to its roots and combining elements from all three to make more of a hallway shooter, but in the vein of also modern shooters at the time by giving you a regenerating health bar measured by a blood-splattered screen and a 2-gun limit. Overall, I think the reason that Thing is on this list is because it was a game that stuck with me. It wasn't anything particularly special, but it was fun for what it was, and I did like how it had a story with a beginning, middle, and end, even if parts of it were a bit muddled. It definitely had a little bit of that edgy tone that a lot of Flash games had with its gratuitous blood, but unlike other games I played, it actually seemed to fit what they were doing. You were a typical 90s anti-hero fighting your way through bad guys with guns. It kind of made sense in the context that they were exploding in blood. They made a Thing spin-off survival game called Thing Arena, but I had no interest in it since it wasn't part of the main story. Anyway, that's some Flash games from my childhood. Maybe I'll talk more about in the future, but that'll take me actually trying to remember what they were and avoid getting a virus to find and play them again. Seriously, the internet is the worst. It's not hard to see why our school computers blocked them, aside from not wanting the principal walking in to see tons of cartoon blood and gore on the screen. That's not going to look good at the PTA meeting, is it, Cameron?
Say something, I'm giving up on you.
Failure.